Not gonna happen. Yeah. So, Ernie,
Okay, hey, we're now live. I think so. The wish is for peace in the Middle. I don't know if I can promise you peace in the Middle East. I can't
what?
imagine a future where the Middle East is as peaceful as America is at that point in time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Just school
Now,
One,
shootings.
what
Just
changes
school
to make
shootings.
that possible is an interesting question.
Yeah. No,
nothing.
we'll teach them
Is
to do
is
school shootings.
is religion, Jewish, Muslim. Nothing is gonna make those people at peace.
I've
Nothing.
been looking at history. They've been doing this for over 2,000 years, if not
Yeah,
5,000.
But
No
I mean,
stopping
since
it.
since Muhammad and these,
I
since
mean,
that time.
let's be
No,
brutally
before
honest.
Muhammad.
Other than like the Pax Romana or the Pax Britannia, and a bunch of Pacific Islanders who can't make war on each other because they're separated by large canoes. Are you aware of any society that hasn't had peace unless it was preceded by vicious annihilating warfare?
Big
Um,
question.
So I mean, like this
well,
is the thing. It's like the traditionally the way that people get peace is an empire opposes oppression from above, and that keeps them from fighting each other. I mean, I hate to say this as an Indian, but it's true. Like we were not a
Okay.
peaceful, kumbaya community until the British came and imposed an empire on us.
Right. Right.
the same
Yeah.
with Palestine. Yeah,
Palestine
they
was peaceful when the Ottoman Empire crushed everybody. The British Empire said, "Oh, let's just be nice and then we'll just go away." And that's why we're here now, right? It's like we hate empire and we hate people being abusive to each other. I don't know if there's a I mean, it is certainly possible to do better. I'd rather live under the American Empire than the British Empire, and the British Empire than under the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire than under the Roman Empire. Like, it feels like technology and maybe even sociology and psychology has made things better, but it doesn't mean there isn't still a Faustian bargain involved.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, can you
Just
both check? I sent you an email just now with my questions for Daniel and my constructive hints as to what kind of answers I would be impressed if I saw. In other words, my methods.
Great. Let me bring up that screen and see if this is the path to world peace we've all been looking for.
Yes.
You see on my screen here?
That's it.
yeah.
That's the baby.
Right.
I just added question 7 when I read his definition of the Atlas system carefully about dynamic.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't gotten that email, but
Okay, now
once
send it twice so that could what can I do for you?
Yeah, it's got you correct. It's got your it went to sent to your
I see
Gmail
that, yeah, I see. It's my mail app maybe. Mail
address.
a mail app sometimes acts up, and
Okay, well you'll get it sooner or
anyway,
later. If you can't find it, tell me. Now, so basically, I've analyzed modeling systems which try to deal with complexity, risk, and these things. In fact, I have some papers on that at the very bottom, RE modeling problems. And let me just weigh in with one very simple deciding factor that I have read the Atlas papers. And as usual, there is almost nothing about what I would call values or qualities, let alone explicit quantitative modeling of things like maintainability, reliability. Okay, it just isn't there. So I have a suspicion they cannot and do not model qualities or values. Now, at that point, I would say the whole modeling system is a farce. It cannot model anything critical or interesting in the real world. Go back and try again, kids. And if you need any help, read point 1 below value planning. But it gets worse. Okay. So the other questions are about what do you do about costs, all kinds of costs of time, people, money. And I couldn't find much about that there. And so, that's a very important real world problem to model about complex systems. And again, I have a whole book I wrote this summer called Cost Engineering to get into that in some depth. But I couldn't see any signs of it, again, you lose. This is not a relevant system for modeling a complex real world dynamically. Costs change and resource allocation change dynamically in real complex systems, and you have to be able to model them. And then we go on and have constraints. And there are lots of different constraints, but I've written a whole book on it called Guides. That's number 3 down there in the middle, Theory of Constraints. And I saw very little there. I may have missed something there. I'll admit that. So I'm asking an open question, pretending almost like I didn't read it. But what I did read didn't give me anything explicit about constraints. And again, constraints, there are many, many types, and they're part of modeling dynamic complex systems in the real world. In fact, constraints are part of what makes the systems complex. And then I asked question number 4, how do you model cause and effect relations, like between any requirements and any designs, even at several levels, which you have to do in large complex systems. And I couldn't, I think the nearest thing might be that things that sort of are close to each other are modeled because as close to each other with arrows. There's something there. But that's not the same as modeling cause and effect. Like if I use Microsoft package X for security, how much security do I get is really my question. And my answer is that my book on impact estimation tables gives a very practical tool for modeling cause and effect. And then, how do they model risks? And I've defined it, deviation from expected values and costs. That's number 5. And then, what do you do about complexity? It says good for complexity. Yeah, fine. What do you do about it? I have 100 different tactics in my Technoscopes book, number 6. Specific things I do about complexity. And then I just, as the meeting was starting, realized they are claiming to deal with dynamic systems. And I said, if you do not put numeric levels and dates on your various values and costs, how can you well, that's screwed up, but how can you model dynamics? I'll fix that up in my how can you model dynamics? Okay, so I've corrected that there. Okay, so I have a challenging set of questions, and I would go as far as saying if he even can't give really good answers up to the standard I would set, which I hope he would agree with. Intelligent people will agree with these things. Then I think he should go back to the drawing board and start deciding to add these things into his modeling systems, and then we'll have a new meeting with him. Of course, Atlas 2. Now he's already got this Atlas new version. They're working on it. So I think he suffers from the kinds of problems of modeling that are very common amongst people, especially people in IT, who try to build a system for modeling anything. And that is, in a nutshell, all of these problems. Now, if I can explain or give example of anything to you, fine. One option is to read one of the value planning is an 800-page book, so you can start with that. A friend of mine's reading it right now. He's up to chapter 6 out of 12.
We'll see if he's still your friend by the time he gets to chapter 12.
Yeah. No, he's already read my competitive engineering book of 500 pages, cover to cover.
That's a good friend.
He's a man who writes many books and is very well known and teaches internationally. So he's not a dummy, but he's just realized the stuff I have. You know, even he started out about 2 years ago interviewing me for a podcast. His name is John Coleman, by the way. So
plug his book. We can do that.
Yeah, screen. John Coleman. You'll find him. He's in England now.
Is there a particular book that he's famous for that we should be aware of?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'd have to look up John Coleman, Coleman, and find out. I don't have any of his books myself.
Okay.
I don't know him at that level, but he is very busy extracting. He sent me 3 emails yesterday and 4 emails the day before, and each email had 5 paragraphs from the books he's reading. He said, I just love this, and I'm going to include it in my new book. He loves to include quotes from other people and give sources.
John Coleman is a way too generic name to easily search against.
Yes. Okay, I'll help you out. I can do better.
Yeah.
But if you want to...
Congratulations on being named Tom Gill. That's a nice short name that is still unique. Unlike, say, Ernest Bruce, which is...
Right. Okay.
Almost ungoogleable.
But, yeah. His web... What do we want to web? I'll say what I'm going to do. I will send you my VCF with all of his links. That
okay, maybe I can add one later. Anyway, thank you. This is good. We will definitely forward that to Daniel. I have some thoughts, but I wanted to give Ernest a chance to share any reflections he's had either on the conversations with Daniel, the papers, or what you just shared.
Yeah. And I would hope that both of you would, I don't know, I would dream that you at least took one of the questions and read 1 or 2 pages of one of the books and tried to figure out exactly what I was saying and compare it to Atlas. In other words, that you were mentally prepared. You don't, of course, you don't have to, and I'll hold up the side there, but it would be nice if
I have some thoughts about how I'd like to
nudge you. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. I want to nudge you guys into this too. That's why we're together.
Yeah. Ernest, did you have anything you want to share or react to?
Not really. You can go ahead.
Okay. So here's the thing. All right. First of all, I want to be sympathetic to Daniel because he's effectively like a grad student on this project with all these eminent professors, and it's not easy for him to say or even think that they're full of BS. Right. So right. I want to not put him in an impossible position. 2, like I've become convinced. I was actually listening to a Jordan Peterson talk, who is not my favorite speaker, but he has some interesting things to say on occasion. And this video had an interesting thing. And he made the point there is this sort of eternal timeless concept, which is useful to have, and it's an anchor. But real world ethical decisions are made in an imminent incarnation into a particular place in time. And I think a lot about this with my own work. It's like, okay, it's fine it's good and useful to have a high level abstract concept of quote unquote the right thing to do. But the interesting challenge, and one in which I think the idea of active inference might help, is precisely this challenge of how do I take this vast store of knowledge, like say a book by Tom, and apply it efficiently to people who have a finite amount of attention, a finite amount of even caring what I listen to, in order to help move them closer to a better possible future, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that's the question that I'm having both conceptually and practically is, okay, it would be great if everyone read all your books and fully understood them and applied them. That is unlikely to happen. Your best friends, take a while to get through 16 chapters of a book, right? And so
that's right.
And I've read through a few of your PDF books. I understand something, but I'm actually less concerned about understanding them deeply than I am about applying them usefully in small doses.
Okay, I'm with you there.
Yeah, and so
I
I think
accept the challenge, and I have dealt with it, believe it or not, and I can be specific.
Okay.
So
let me pause
here,
and let you reply to that then. If I'm curious to hear
yeah,
your
okay.
example.
Okay. Just a moment. I'm going to give you guys a link. There we go. Okay, and I'm putting the link in messages. Oh, wrong guy. Let's see where we are. There we are. Does this go to both of you?
I have
Yeah.
I see words, but not, okay, there's the Dropbox.
Okay, so there's a little booklet there called 12 Tough Questions. And you cannot get more condensed and still encompass what I have to say. For example, the first question is very simple. Is your assertion quantified? You know, you're saying
okay.
Yeah, that's all. That's all it is. But now I put these 12 questions on the back of a business card, and that the print to cut out and paste to the back of your business card is in that paper. And I have handed these out to executives with no training and just said, stare at this at your next boring meeting. And they do, and they report back. They have an awful lot of fun asking these nasty questions of people who don't know what they're talking about, trying to sell them something. Now,
Yes.
that's simple.
Yes, that is simple. That is not my problem.
Oh, sorry. Rephrase problem.
Yes, exactly. This is precisely the issue. Like, making snarky comments about how other people are stupid is very easy. I do not need a lot of help to do that.
Okay. And by the way, Ernie, I don't do that. I hope I didn't come across as doing it.
You said the businessmen, they can be very entertained, pointing out all the holes.
That one. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I did that. I did that.
I'm not accusing you of
but
that.
But I have no intent of attacking Friedman. I would love to enlighten him so he can be the hero and helps make Atlas something better.
Right, and this is actually the intriguing idea that I don't know if they have solved this problem, but they have set themselves up where they're going to collide with this problem, which is what I love about what people are doing, right? One of the biggest things that I've been learning this week, I screwed up a product release this week and I'm falling on my sword, and it happens. It was like, okay, the important thing is that we must make the right mistakes. You'd like to avoid the wrong mistakes. You would also like to avoid the wrong successes. And that requires a willingness to make the right mistakes. And I realize one of the failure modes I fall into is trying to prevent people from making mistakes. And that ends up preventing them from making the necessary mistakes. Like, I do want to prevent people from making unnecessary mistakes, but I actually want to encourage them to make the necessary mistakes, right?
Can we not simplify a little bit? The essence is, whether it be a good or bad mistake, that you learn from both rapidly.
Right. Well, yes, and that's the interesting. Yeah, that's good. Here's the meta thing that I've been wrestling with. Maybe this is actually relevant and may feed back into the act of ignorance. There's a wonderful phrase I learned, which is called transmissionism. Have either of you heard this word?
Nope, never heard of it.
It is the belief that if you sit people down and you explain a bunch of facts to them, that they will gain knowledge. And this has been roundly debunked in all the psychological and educational literature, and is yet insanely intensively practiced pretty much everywhere in Western society. And they say, well, sometimes I learn something in a lesson. Yes, you learn something in a lecture precisely when you stop listening and start thinking about how to assimilate that fact into your cognitive reality. Right? Is that the idea is that knowledge must be constructed by, like, information can be just received. You can give me a bunch of facts, I can parrot them back, I can memorize the card, whatever. The hard part of changing behavior, which I think is what we actually want, is the idea that people have to construct their own knowledge so that they understand, okay, how does this fit into what I already know and believe? Is it compatible? Do I have to reject it? Do I have to change something I believe to accommodate this in a useful way? And this sort of constructivist understanding of knowledge, of being willing to create a mental model of the receiver and provide, yes, information, but in a context where they have time and motivation to assimilate it, is the actual way that you create change. Does that make sense?
Yes, sounds good.
Ernest, you had a puzzled look on your face?
Microphone.
You're muted, that's why you're puzzled.
You said create change. Now, the meaning of that, I don't know what that means. Does it mean
I want you,
I
I want people, I see people acting in a certain way and I do nothing, they continue doing it, right? But it's like, oh, I would like them to help me. I would like them to stop hurting me. I would like them to stop doing, horrific things to people I care about. That's what I mean, like, I would like to create a change.
So yeah, you would like to teach them a little bit of your knowledge and value set. You want to show them those values, because without that way they can then do his values are compatible with mine, or can I change them? Like you can say, I love this person, don't hurt her, but the other person might, I don't love that person. Why would I not hurt her? I hate her. So this guy, you love this person, this other guy hates her, but you said don't hit her. Now, how can you convince that person not to hit the
Right, like the goal is to change the behavior, is for them to stop hitting her.
Yeah, right? Well, you have to.
That is the desire you have. Is like, if I have a desire, like I have a desire, like if I do nothing, the world is a certain way. I mean, I think this is actually not a bad definition of what I think active inference is supposed to mean. We'll find out, right? Is that I have a mental model of how the world should be. I see people acting in a way that is contrary to that mental model. I don't want to change my mental to say, yep, the world sucks, we just got to live with it. Therefore, I must actively intervene and say, hey, let me do something to try and stop this horrible thing from happening. Right?
You have to make it so that this other person wants to share a little part of your model. They have to adapt it. Otherwise,
well, that's the interesting question, is there are many ways to accomplish the goal of changing behavior, right? One way is to like shoot the guy, eliminate them from the equation, right? Very popular in Palestine these days, right? We have to acknowledge that that's on the table. We say, okay, we'd like to find less. Okay, you could, create a barrier between this person and that person, right? These are all possible interventions that could be taken. You could, and again, also very popular in Gaza until it stopped working and turned into the first one, right? Then on the other extreme, it's like, well, I could say nice words and hope that they just change their mind. This was the 60s mantra, which sort of worked until it didn't. But there's a whole range of cognitive interventions. So there's physical interventions one could take, and then there's cognitive interventions. And we vastly prefer cognitive interventions to physical interventions because they're less lethal, less dangerous, less expensive, less collateral damage. And that's the interesting question. What is the right kind of, right? So one is to change the context in which they're perceiving things. So their mental model doesn't change, but their inputs, oh, did you know that this person, like what's the standard movie line? This person saved your sister's life. Like there could be facts that would totally change their perception of the person without changing their mental model. Not always possible, but sometimes there is facts that can change it. Sometimes there are skills like, oh, you're really angry, and you have a right to be angry because this person did something that actually was pretty horrible to you. But there's actually a skill you can learn of how to process your emotions you're feeling and realizing like you don't actually hate her, you actually hate your mother or your sister who abused you when you were a child, and you're taking it out on this poor woman. And you can learn skills, and then you could also, in extreme cases, change their value system. So there's a range of cognitive interventions that could be taken. And it depends on the capacity of the person that you're dealing with, the context in which you're dealing with them, and your own capacity that you have, right? If you're a cop and your role is one thing, it's very different than if you're a 10-year-old child. And the interesting thing that I do not know if cognitive security even tries to answer this, but I think they are grandiose enough that they're going to collide with these problems eventually. Now, they're half academic, so if they're academic enough, they could avoid the reality of the world indefinitely. If they are just dealing with government and large IT corporations, they can avoid reality for a very long time because most of the organizations are very good at that. But what I love about Daniel, he's willing to say, yes, I actually believe this matters. I believe it should apply to ordinary people in everyday life. And that's awesome because the consumer is incredibly fickle. We are incredibly fickle. And he is willing to engage with us in that brutal world. And like, okay, if he's willing to meet us that way, I mean, he was terrified of doing a public thing, the first couple of rounds, and we built enough trust with him, he's willing to do that, which I'm so grateful for. And this session, he's really focusing on his paper. So I want to try and, what I want to do is come up with like, okay, let me try to understand where in his worldview, there's an affordance that would awaken a sense of wonder in him. If that word makes sense. It's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. Let me show you that I understand what you're trying to do here. And I understand why you believe in it, which is really hard when someone believes something that just seems obviously flawed on so many levels, but this is my whole life because the whole world seems insane to me on a regular basis, including myself. And it's like, okay, let me steel man this and then try to have the empathy, the cognitive modeling of his worldview is like, okay, what problem is this solving for him today? Even if it's not my problem, even if it's not the problem he said he's trying to solve, what is the problem he's trying to solve? And say, okay, I can validate that you are doing something worthwhile for good reasons. But I feel like there's a question that you would see as relevant, that if you could ask it, would help you be more effective at what you already want to do. Like that's always the best, that's the cheapest intervention you can make, right? Is to get people to stop and ask a question that is already aligned with their worldview and their values, but it surfaces an anomaly that is generative. Does that make sense? Or did I lose you with those words? Ernest, am I rambling too much?
No, well, the answer is it's complicated because there's a universe of things, context, urgency, all those things. And you say you have to decide which is better for the situation. So do I try to adapt, try to learn what the other person's worldview is so that I can then respond with the appropriate response, which might be different depending on what he shares with you. So I don't know that I can give you a specific.
No, but I think that was great. It's like I loved your answer. It's like, wouldn't it be great is when you face one of these situations and you want to pursue a cognitive intervention, you had a schema of, these are the different factors I should take into consideration. And these are the different responses that are appropriate based on those contexts. And you could actually get trained, like people who are hostage negotiators are trained for certain kinds of things. People who are psychiatrists, people who are IT consultants are trained, and they have, like, some people have very good toolboxes that are very well matched to the actual reality of the situation, And some people have really crappy toolboxes that are really well matched to the superficialities of the situation, right? I think that's Tom's biggest bugbear, is all these people who claim to be experts and are really good at selling solutions, but are horrible at solving problems, right? Right? I think that's what triggers Tom. And the dream of cognitive security is that it can take some of the ideas for things that we know work well in narrow circumstances and apply them to not just the problem of how to sell an IT solution that actually solves the problem, but how do we explain to IT consultants in a way they don't take offense at that there might be a better way to help them get what they actually want. And that's the really intriguing idea, is that we could build up a set of languages and tools for choosing and implementing the right cognitive intervention. Like, that's the intriguing idea that I've been picking up from what little I've been able to understand of the CogSec view. And they are very immature in their approach, no question about it. But to me, and this is maybe a difference, let me see if this is the difference between you and me, Tom. I don't know if it's an actual disagreement or just a superficial thing. I personally find having the right knowledge schema incredibly powerful, even if there is no quantification whatsoever. It's the oriental, it doesn't help me with the decision part, but it helps me with the observe and orient part of an OODA loop. You muted there.
Yes, yes. Quantification is not an absolute necessity. It's just a hell of a good tool in certain situations. Did you hear me?
Yeah,
so your microphone.
let me posit this. I don't know if I believe this or not, but it's interesting how is that you need a knowledge schema to observe and orient, but you need quantification to decide and act and iterate.
No, that's good. It's a good start. Again, it's a tool which is more powerful than mere words, but you can get a long way without quantification, without measurement. But so the quantification and measurement is just an additional tool that makes things faster, surer, better, less risk. It's called science and engineering, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that if the generous interpretation is that CogSec is a very immature field, they're still trying to figure out their schema, and they haven't got far enough to actually be able to quantify things. And particularly the Atlas project is, to be fair, as knowledge management is almost explicitly about creating schema and not at all about data or quantification. Now, one could argue that's a critique of knowledge management as a tool in an industry and a discipline, and I would be tempted to agree with you. But okay, given that this is a knowledge management tool, let's first evaluate it as a knowledge management tool, and then we can think about, okay, when you need to actually get around to applying it, the interface between that and the real world will probably require some level of instrumentation and quantification, or else you're just going to be spinning your wheels.
Now, you won't have a way of expressing rather critical ideas.
Well, right. But the question is that, in your framework, I don't know where I put in develop empathy for the consumer's worldview.
Okay, I have a book called Stakeholder Engineering. I'll happily send a copy, but that's where my empathy for the stakeholders is.
Right. So and refresh my memory, because I think I skimmed the book very superficially a long time ago. Right.
Okay.
But my understanding is that the and maybe you do spend more time on this in practice than in the rhetoric I remember. But the problem I have is that the knowing which schema to interrogate stakeholders by, because like in my life, I always find that the superficial answer people give me to simple questions are invariably wrong. And even if I ask them for quantifications, those quantifications are laughably wrong. And usually what I find out, my actual error was that I engaged them at the wrong level of the question, where they weren't willing to actually tell me or even admit to themselves their true beliefs.
Okay. So
Ernest, are you trying to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, like when you say their quantification is wrong, well, they think it's right. So, but you think it's wrong, and
No,
why do you
no. They think it's right. I try it out. It turns out to have been horribly wrong. Oh, this is going to take a day. Okay, let's give you a day. Oh no, it's going to take another day. Well, okay, it ends up taking a week. So like it was retroactively discovered to be completely invalid.
Okay.
I put a note in there.
There's a intensive process.
Ernie, you asked the questions. I was just give a quick answer. So I gave in the messages. I gave the link to stakeholder engineering, which is an awful lot about dealing with these people. But the value planning book answers your question more directly. The Schema for dialoguing with these people. In other words, and the simple question is, what are your values? And let's just say they say user friendliness. Okay. And then I say, okay, what kinds of user friendliness? They might say, my ability to learn to operate a system quickly. Okay. How fast would you like to do that compared to anybody else? And I say that they might say, I'd like to be able to do it very much faster than anybody else, at least twice as fast. Now we have numeracy. Now we have things that can be experimented with and tested. But the point is, value planning tries to interview the stakeholders about their stakeholder values and pin them down systematically so that they are stable, 100% intelligible, and can be used to measure progress in the development of a system or solving of problems.
Yes, I got that. That's my problem. That's precisely what I'm critiquing, is that like and I don't have good language for it, which is my problem, which is what I'm struggling with. I'm hoping the CogSec people will help with, right? So here, let me try explain what I mean. Is that okay, assume people mean what they say, and it just needs to be precise and quantified. But when people say they want user friendliness, they may think they want user friendliness, like when I'm selling IT solutions to people, we want a user-friendly solution. And okay, what do you mean by that? And they'll give me a long list of checks of what it means to be user-friendly. But then you discover the real reason they're not buying is they want something that is cheap that they can get past their boss. That's the thing they actually care about, which has nothing to do with user-friendliness. Okay. They see user-friendliness because everyone says that's what they actually need.
This is called a hidden agenda, or perhaps an unknown agenda, depending on how conscious they are of it. Yeah. Now, by the way, I assume that people will always write and tell me the wrong thing. In fact, this is one of Elon Musk's #1 principle: assume the requirements are always wrong, no matter who they come from and how intelligent they are. Okay,
right.
So what I assume is you start somewhere, however bad it is, and you decide if you need to iterate in the direction of a more refined definition or truth of, for example, user friendliness. And I assume that you have infinite iteration in the direction of better understanding until this is no longer useful. That's my assumption.
Right. And so, okay, I think that's the
dialogue.
The place that I got hung up on val plan. It's like, okay, if I assume that people are telling me the truth, it's worth all this effort to drill down on all this to great level of detail. But what if they're just wrong? Or either because they're the words they use are just wrong. And what is and I guess that's the thing that maybe if I was a virtuoso like you, this would be trivial, but like the machinery and mechanics of quantifying everything seems to get in the way of this metacognitive re-schematization to understand whether people are lying to me or themselves. And what is the fast loop for converging on that, which is usually, for me, the largest source of error.
Yeah. Okay. So number one, there is some kind of truth in the world, like what people will buy. We're building a product, and the stakeholder, maybe the chief marketing officer, will tell you what he sincerely believes is the right thing, but it's wrong. Now, this can be tested. So they do this all the time. You throw it out of the market and it doesn't sell, and we have to analyze again. And we keep on iterating until it does sell. And then we found something closer to a useful truth. And then the only question becomes, wow, that now sells pretty well. How could we sell 1,000 times more? Becomes the next question. And then the point is, there is iteration towards a useful truth or set of values, like sales and profit. And that's what all businesses are doing at all times. Sorry.
In theory, yes. I don't know how many. In theory, yes. In practice, most of it is a weird combination of politics and cargo culting, with occasional interventions by reality.
Yeah, I know that, and I agree with it. It's horrible. All I've tried to do is enforce a little bit more discipline in precise communication, so we don't waste our time through sheer ambiguous communication without even knowing it. So I'm trying to get rid of a very human problem that almost all words mean different things to almost all different people. In other words, words are a tool, but they're also an enemy in communication because of their normal ambiguity. Take a simple word like user-friendliness. Very ambiguous.
And so there's this interesting essay I read about, and I won't give the context, about how marriage counseling was invented by the Nazis. I mean, we've just spoke Godwin's law here. Because they were worried about the Aryan fertility rates. And they adapted communication. Like the goal is to improve communication. What has been interestingly shown is that if you have differences of perception, improving communication makes things worse.
Okay.
Right?
Now, when you say perception, when you say perception, do you mean set of values?
It's an interesting question. I was quoting from the article. What is a matter of perception? And the short answer is how they experience reality. Right. And maybe their own, maybe the mental models that they carry around. Right. And given that I have this mental model, being able to communicate more precisely will help it collide with reality faster, perhaps. Right. It won't necessarily help me learn. Right. Because what I've discovered, bizarrely to me as a scientist, even though I know I do it myself, is people will make a mistake. It will be horrible, and they will refuse to learn anything from that because of extrinsic factors. And this is precisely the sort of questions that I'm hoping CogSec would be willing to tackle, even if they have no clue how they're going to solve it, is what are the contexts where actual human beings with real needs, psychoses, neuroses, whatever, actually are able to absorb new information in a way that is productive and generative, as opposed to blindly making the same mistakes over and over again in the face of overwhelming data. And, is there a way to think about this and talk about this that will make me less annoying and less annoyed?
How about having you say reality, right? There's an external reality, or external to you and to the other person. we learn by example. I think that if you say, hey, these are my values, this is my set of qualification quantifiers, and they provide an example, like, yeah, I did a sale last month, and from that sale, I get these values. And then somebody else says, oh, I have another sale. And from the real world, each person constructs their own little mental model. But you have to have something to point to. You have to say, these are my numbers because of this. There's a concrete example of what I'm talking about. So user friendliness, okay. A complete example of that.
Well, let me help you with that. It's like, oh, okay, I would buy something like this. Great. Here's something you sketch on a piece of paper. Here's something that offers that. Would you buy this today? Right? Yeah. Is that you give them the thing that they say they ask, you show them the thing that they ask for in a way they can relate to.
Yes.
And then you find out whether they actually respond to that positively or negatively, right? That dynamic is interesting. And that is less a function of information content than emotional affect, right? Some people, if you give them a really quick napkin sketch, will have a strong emotional reaction. They're like, yes, that exactly happened. Some people would need the glitzy demo to get the right emotional reaction of like, yes, that's what I want, or no, yes, that's what I asked for, but that's not the, you've heard this before. Yes, that's what I asked for. No, that's not what I want. Right? And getting those honest reactions is the goal, right? This is the thing that I don't see in your system. It's probably there, Tom, is where am I getting emotional buy-in and enthusiasm from the people I'm interviewing? How do I know that I'm touching them at a deep emotional level that will actually inspire action?
At some level, you cannot know, but sometimes their outer behavior, such as purchasing or complaining, will give you some signals. So basically, you have to try to collect data and learn, and you don't expect to get the full truth and nothing but the truth on the first iteration. By the way, I just sent you a little set of slides about the Gilb cycle, which is an eternal cycle with about 8 elements of basically doing stuff and learning and adjusting. And that's my world, is I assume that cycle is eternal and there is no final truth or perfect knowledge or anything. There's just nudging the system in hopefully useful directions by listening carefully. Is that the dev cycle? Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's the one. Yeah, it's very... that's an expansion of the Deming cycle, plan, do, study, act, to simplify it for those who know that.
This has actually been a really interesting conversation, and I'll send the link to Daniel if you're feeling brave, or we'll just give him the summary there. But when I look at this, it feels to me I could do that whole thing with my left brain. I've just run into I think Ian McGilchrist's Master and the Emissary. Are you familiar with this book?
No.
Wow. Okay, cool. So it made a splash a while ago. I forget how long ago, but his basic point is that...
I'm happy to get a citation so I can look it up.
Yeah, no, I'll get one to you shortly. But the idea is it's about the left brain versus the right brain, and not agreeing with the canonical ancient division of left brain and right brain, but there is still a specialization that's going on. And he describes it as the left brain is linear and the right brain is contextual. And that his example is like, if you're a bird, you are linearly, and the reason we have 2 hemispheres is so we can focus on 2 different things. So if I'm a bird looking at a seed on the ground, my left brain is like, okay, there's the seed. I'm focused on that. I'm going to manipulate my muscles very precisely to pick up that seed quickly. But my right brain is watching all of my senses in a non-judgmental way to detect predators, friends, environmental things that are going on around me. And his claim is that, every solution starts out with these things as balanced, but because the left brain controls the PR, the press releases, the verbal, the history, whatever, they slowly take over and they just smother the right brain, right? Steve Jobs is famous for saying Apple is really the synthesis of sort of the right brain liberal arts with the left brain of technology. I'm not sure if I got even the hands right on that, but of course, he mentioned that it's also the hindbrain of commerce driving all of it. And that's the thing that the affective component that Apple was a master of. I don't know if they still are. That's an interesting debate. We'll see what happens with the Vision Pro. But this idea of I could be completely right on all the facts and all the processes, but if people don't like me and trust me, I will not accomplish the change I want in this world.
Sure. I feel extremely limited in communicating ideas and teaching and convincing people. At the extreme, I say, well, I've given up. I'm going to write some books and I'm going to put them on the web. And if some archaeologists in 1,000 years pick them up and find me useful, that's nice. In the meantime, I have little faith I can do very much more now with real people.
Wow,
but
that would be a great stretch question for CogSec. Could you restore faith in our ability to actually help people?
Yeah,
I've given up. I'm 83. I try all the time, every day, helping people, projects, and things like that. But largely, I've learned that the people don't want to listen for a wide variety of reasons, and I can't do a damn thing about it. So it doesn't matter how rational or useful my tools are. But I've also learned that some people find them useful and pick them up and use them. That is, the tools are not wrong. It's the willingness and receptiveness and environment of the people who might pick them up that's the problem. They're just not ready for it.
Right. So this is the interesting thing that I've been grappling with, and it's bizarre how many situations this is coming up in, is I think you said rationality doesn't work. Yes, that's kind of the point. Is there something else that would? That's
well, what
the
about
question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I sometimes use the phrase motivation is everything. And motivation isn't necessarily rational at all. It could be like falling in love or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think people have to be motivated to use rational tools to do better things. And if they're not motivated, it doesn't help to have my rational tools. And I don't deal with the motivational part. I only deal with the rational tools. So I'm limited until I get this superpower of motivating everybody to love my tools. And I haven't figured that out. I haven't even tried.
Yes, so that is a fantastic question to pose to Daniel. Is this conversation of there's all these things other than rationality. Does cognitive security and I think cognitive science deals with, I'm not actually sure how. I know that these have a word, affective, to refer to emotional states. And certainly the examples they give about fatigue and boredom and impatience and frustration as being factors in the cognitive landscape implies that they ought to care about these things. Whether they've escaped the left brain trap, I don't know. Anyway, we are getting close to the end. This has been fascinating and surprisingly vulnerable and encouraging. So I have no idea what to do with it, but I will write up my notes and post them and share them with Daniel, and we will see what happens. Any last thoughts from anybody?
It's funny that you mentioned likability, like Steve Jobs, and I'm thinking of Elon Musk. Those two people are not likable, but what they do, people like what they do.
I mean, and it's fair to say, I did not usually like Steve Jobs, but I often loved him.
Same here. Like, I I never spoke with him, but I admire him, and that's why I joined Apple.
Yeah.
He left us, and then my connection to Apple kind of like withered.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so there's something interesting there. I mean, yes, and there's something there. I don't know what it is, but I think we will have an interesting discussion to see. I mean, we're going to let Daniel do his paper. He's got his own thing he's doing. We're just there to sort of egg him on in appropriate directions. But my plan is to like listen and say, huh, there's something there that resonates with something we discussed. Maybe this is a good time to raise a question without derailing him that might plant a seed for a future discussion. All right. This has been a blast. I think I should just keep this on the calendar for the three of us to meet. And maybe I'll push the next one till after we meet with Daniel. But rather than trying to get everyone and doing only CogSec, this has been a lot of fun. I've missed you guys. This has been this has been very special. So thank you. And we'll see y'all soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.